April 9, 2018. Fort Myers, Florida. A Tuesday morning, warm and quiet the way it always was along that stretch of the Gulf Coast. Employees at the Marina Village resort at Snug Harbor were doing routine checks after a water leak had been reported in the building. Room 404 was supposed to be empty. The guest had been expected to check out days earlier, so it was simply a walk-through, nothing more than a formality. But the moment they stepped inside, something felt wrong. A purse sat near the entrance. Personal belongings were still scattered around the room. Whoever had been staying there had not left. They called out, shouted hello into the silence, and heard nothing come back. The air inside was still. Too still. As they moved deeper into the room, a smell hit them, heavy and unmistakable. It was coming from the ensuite bathroom. A towel had been pushed up against the base of the door, as if someone had placed it there deliberately, perhaps to seal in what was on the other side. The door would not open all the way. Something was blocking it from the inside. They pushed harder. It was not something. It was someone. A woman was lying on the bathroom floor, covered over with towels, shot dead. She had been there for days. The beginning stages of decomposition had already set in. Her name was Pamela Hutchinson. She was 59 years old. She had come to Fort Myers not for a vacation, not for work, but to help a dear friend scatter her late husband's ashes. A final act of kindness, all the way out to the coast. That is the kind of person she was. Pamela had grown up with that rare, magnetic quality that made people feel at ease the moment she walked into a room. She was always in something brightly colored, always laughing, always the person you called when you needed someone who would actually show up. Her cousin said she loved fiercely. Her Aunt Mona said she was someone with so much energy you were just drawn to her. She was generous, reliable, and completely present in every relationship she had. Life had not always been easy for her. After caring for her mother for years, Pamela found herself standing at a crossroads when her mother passed. She looked honestly at her life and decided to be equally honest about what was no longer working. Her marriage to James had run its course. The split was not without its rough patches, but once it was behind her, she stepped back into the world with everything she had. She booked the trips she had always postponed. She watched sunsets from barstools. She made friends wherever she went. She had just found a new beachfront condo, and in a matter of weeks she was supposed to be picking up the keys and starting fresh. Back in room 404, sitting on the pillows of her bed, were two stuffed toy monkeys. She had carried them with her everywhere for years. A gift from her mother. She never made it home. There was no sign of a break-in. No forced entry, no evidence of a struggle inside the room. The resort required key fobs to access nearly every area of the property, meaning whoever had come into that room had been let in. By Pamela herself. Which meant she had trusted this person. A receipt on the counter connected to the Smoke and Oyster Brewery, a restaurant a short walk from the resort. It was dated April 5, just after 7:30 in the evening, 4 days before her body was found. The resort was well covered by cameras, good quality, and pointed at just about every common area and entry point on the property. Investigators pulled the footage and started working backward through the days. What they found changed everything. At 5:15 in the afternoon on April 5, Pamela appeared at the Smoke and Oyster, sitting at the bar, wearing a pink cap, relaxed, sipping a drink, talking to a man she had struck up a conversation with. Then another person entered the frame. A woman, dressed in blue, sat down in the empty seat beside her and offered Pamela a high five. The man quietly stepped away. The two women fell into easy conversation, laughing and leaning in, clearly comfortable with each other. They stayed together for the next couple of hours. Nothing unusual. Nobody joined them. They just talked and drank the way two old friends would on a warm Florida evening. At 7:43, the check was settled. Both women got up and walked out together. 3 minutes later, the resort cameras caught them entering Pamela's condo on the 4th floor. The footage from other days told a fuller story. The same woman in blue had been appearing in the footage for several days prior. Management confirmed seeing the two together constantly, eating together, drinking in the hot tub, spending long evenings side by side. They seemed, by every outward measure, like close friends. The second bedroom in room 404, the one Pamela had not been using, showed signs of being slept in. Someone had been staying there. The woman in blue had effectively moved into Pamela's space. At 8:30 that night, the woman in blue came back out of the condo alone. She stood on the balcony for a while. She appeared to be crying. Talking to herself. No one else entered that room. No one else left. And based on what investigators determined about the time of Pamela's death, it was within that 45-minute window, after they returned from the bar, that Pamela was shot and killed from behind. The woman in blue was her killer. What happened next revealed just how cold and calculated this had been all along. At 6 in the morning on April 6, the woman returned to Pamela's unit wearing a pink shirt and shorts. She left with a large suitcase. An hour and a half later, she came back in different clothes, carrying a full plastic bag when she left. Someone called the resort that same morning using a voice that staff said sounded like Pamela's, requesting a 3-day extension on the room. The card was charged. Between 6 in the morning and noon, the woman was captured on camera entering and leaving room 404 multiple times, each time wearing different outfits, carrying different bags. At 12:42, she walked through the parking lot wearing Pamela's white hat. She got into a white Cadillac Escalade and drove it about a mile away, then walked back to the resort, collected more bags, returned to the parking lot, and drove off in Pamela's white Aura. She was not hiding. She was not rushing. She was methodical, unbothered, cycling through clothing changes in a building packed with cameras as if none of it applied to her. To piece together who this woman was, investigators connected the white Cadillac Escalade to a be-on-the-lookout alert that had recently been issued back in Fort Myers. The vehicle was jointly registered to David and Lois Riess. And it turned out that just a few weeks earlier, over 1,000 miles away in Blooming Prairie, Minnesota, another body had been found. David Riess. Shot dead. And his wife, Lois, was gone. The woman in the footage was Lois Riess. And now she was a suspect in 2 murders. David had been a well-liked man in his community. A Navy veteran who stayed on the reserves list long after his service ended. A wholesale bait business owner who had built something tangible just steps from his own front door. His employees said he never shied away from the work, but that it never seemed to wear on him either because he genuinely loved what he did. Friends described his laugh as something you could hear from rooms away. He lived simply, found pleasure in fishing, hunting, spending time outdoors, and nothing made him happier than passing those things on to his grandchildren. He and Lois had been married since 1982. They had 3 children and 5 grandchildren. By the time the welfare check was called in, it was because people who knew David had started sensing something was wrong. He had been absent from work in a way that was entirely out of character. And his text messages had changed. David was known for loose, imprecise typing because of his large hands. He joked about it often. But his recent messages were unusually clean and precise, spelled perfectly, punctuated properly. His business partner trusted that feeling and made the call. Inside the house, nothing appeared disturbed. David's phone was still plugged in and charging. The television was on. The bathroom window had been left open despite the cold outside. And in the bathroom, David was on the floor, shot and covered with a blanket. The same method. The same staging. Towel at the base of the door, victim shot, covered up, and left. Lois was long gone with the Cadillac. The investigation into Lois pulled back a picture of a woman whose life had been quietly unraveling for years. A gambling addiction had consumed enormous amounts of money. She was known at multiple casinos. Staff recognized her. She had become so associated with heavy losses that a nickname had followed her around the floors. At some point, she burned through a $500,000 inheritance. David eventually cut her off from accessing their shared accounts. Legal records showed that in 2015, the level of her casino activity had factored into a decision to remove her as guardian of her older sister Kimberly, who had Parkinson's disease. A civil judgment held that she owed her sister $100,000. And around the time of David's death, she had forged his signature on checks, pulling roughly $11,000 from his accounts. The financial picture was one of someone out of options, running on borrowed time. On the same day David's body was found, Lois stopped at a gas station in Northwood, Iowa. She bought a sandwich, asked a counter employee for directions south, and chatted casually as though she were just passing through on an ordinary afternoon. She was calm, friendly, easy. Nothing about her suggested a woman in the middle of a cross-country flight from a double homicide. On April 2, a woman named Tess was at her holiday home in Fort Myers cleaning out the property when a white Cadillac Escalade pulled up outside. Tess knew who David and Lois Riess were. She was from Minnesota herself. By then, word had already reached people in their community that David had been killed and Lois had disappeared. When Tess looked up and recognized her standing there on the driveway, Lois immediately started shaking her head, saying wrong house, before climbing back into the car and driving away fast. Tess later found out that someone had called her family's business ahead of time trying to find out the address of their holiday home. Whether Lois had planned to stay there, to take from it, or something else entirely is a question that still hangs in the air. Tess called it in. What followed was a frustrating back and forth between law enforcement jurisdictions, calls transferred and dropped, information not reaching the right people fast enough. By the time anyone got to Tess's driveway, Lois had already gone. She had already found Pamela. The thinking was that Lois had deliberately targeted Pamela because she believed the two women bore a resemblance to one another. The plan was identity theft on the run. With Pamela dead, her room cleared out, and her documents in hand, Lois withdrew $5,000 from Pamela's bank account and checked into a Hilton in Ocala, a few hours north. She used Pamela's credit card and ID at check-in. She ordered room service. She rented a movie. She made herself comfortable in someone else's name. When investigators reached that hotel, the room was empty again. She withdrew another $500 from Pamela's account and drove nearly 1,000 miles to Kinder, Louisiana, stopping at a casino along the way where she won $1,500. She collected those winnings using her own ID. When she later tried to pull more money from Pamela's account, the card was declined. The account had been flagged. A clearly unsettled Lois drove into Texas. A warrant had been issued covering second-degree murder, identity theft, grand theft, and grand theft auto. News of the manhunt spread nationally. The phrase used repeatedly was armed and dangerous. The fear driving investigators was not just that she was still out there but that the moment her resources ran completely dry, she would find another victim. She slowed down in South Padre Island, Texas, and checked into a motel. She stayed there for a week. In that time she worked the local bar scene with the same ease she had shown with Pamela. She told anyone willing to listen that her name was Lona, that she was recently widowed, and that she was just passing through. Staff said she went from total stranger to everybody's favorite overnight. Warm, talkative, funny. Nobody had any reason to think twice. One woman at a local steakhouse found herself in conversation with her when Lois approached and noted they were both dining alone. The woman was herself a widow, and the shared circumstance formed a quick connection. They had dinner together again on Friday the 13th. That night at the restaurant, the woman later said she had not felt well after her drink. She had no clear memory of agreeing to bring Lois back to her house that evening. Lois spent the night there. The woman said afterward that the security cameras visible throughout her home may have been what kept her alive. Text messages recovered later showed Lois writing warmly, making plans, maintaining the friendship long enough to keep the door open. The woman did not hear from Lois as expected on the night of their next planned dinner. A waiter told her why. On April 19, U.S. Marshals moved in on the waterfront restaurant Sea Ranch after a staff member recognized Lois from news coverage and called 911. She had already left that bar when they arrived, but she had not gone far. She was taken into custody within minutes. The manhunt spanning more than 1,500 miles across multiple states was over. Her motel room was stacked with things that did not belong to her. Bags, clothing, jewelry, all of it Pamela's. Christmas-related CDs and DVDs, casino flyers. Guns. Drugs. Checkbooks. Maps with handwritten directions marked on them. People in Texas who had spent time with her said afterward that they felt lucky. Those who interviewed Lois after her arrest described something unsettling about her demeanor. She was flat. Cold. Like there was nothing readable behind her eyes. Not grief, not fear, not remorse. Just blankness. A grand jury indicted her on first-degree murder in Pamela's case, and then again in David's. She entered not guilty pleas in both. In December 2019, standing in court, she changed her plea in Pamela's case. She admitted, on the record, that she had killed Pamela Hutchinson with a firearm, with premeditation, between April 5 and April 9, 2018. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She later entered the same plea in David's case. A second life sentence, no parole. Her son stood before the court and spoke. Billy said she had just left. That there was no excuse for it. That no apology could give back what she had taken. Braden said that no one could have seen this coming, that yes, the gambling had been bad, but this, 2 people dead, this was something none of them had the ability to comprehend. He said it still felt like a bad movie he was waiting to wake up from. Her daughter Bria said she moved between anger, regret, and sadness. That the last time she had hugged her father was March 11, 2018. That she missed him in a way words could not reach. That she was trying to leave room for forgiveness because she knew it was what he would have wanted. In a later documentary, Lois spoke. She claimed that her marriage had deteriorated badly, that David had handed her a gun during an argument and told her to get it right this time. She said she had no memory of what happened with Pamela. She talked about blackouts and mental breaks and the idea that there had to be an explanation somewhere. Friends who had known her for decades said they had watched her mental health decline significantly in her later years. They knew about a previous attempt on her own life. They said she had been a different person once. Caring, kind, someone who put others ahead of herself. Whether that version of her and the woman who walked through those resort corridors in April 2018 were connected by something that cracked quietly over time, or whether the gambling debt and desperation simply stripped away any remaining restraint, is a question that does not have a clean answer. People who loved her as a mother and a friend still struggle to reconcile the two pictures. Pamela Hutchinson had been weeks away from picking up the keys to a home she had chosen for herself. A beachfront place where she could fish and walk along the sand and watch the sun go down over the water. She had done the hard work of grief, made the hard decisions about her own life, and come out on the other side ready for whatever came next. She had taken 2 stuffed toy monkeys with her, the way she always did, because some things you carry with you no matter where you go. Her friends gather on her favorite beaches now and think about her. Her Aunt Mona says she should always be remembered as someone who had lots of love and gave it back in equal measure. Some people leave a mark that outlasts everything done to them. Pamela was one of those people.